What's up?
What up? Guess it's just you and me today.
I think so. I don't know what's going on with Julian.
Yeah, he didn't
Hopefully
say.
he's
Hopefully a date.
that's what I'm hoping for, man. Pete said he was interested, but he didn't say what time.
Mm-hmm.
And then Jake said he would try and stop by, but then I didn't hear from him back when I changed and whatnot.
Yeah.
I was thinking about one or two things this week anyway, so
All right. Cool. It seems like I was too, but now I'm having trouble remembering. I'm sure they'll come up as I sit
as
here.
you enjoy the flavors of your whiskey, things will come back to
Oh
you.
yeah, hey, I gotta tell you about this whiskey I had. So, sister was getting married last weekend, and
Yeah. How was that?
I had my buddy. I'll tell you a second. I had my buddy watch Winston come over and let him out and stuff. So I bought him whiskey,
Nice.
as a good bro would.
Yes.
I picked up something called Mythology,
Hmm.
and it was one of the most flavorful whiskeys I've ever had. It was just explosive, really good. It was like a $60 bottle, but really, really good. If you see it, you should pick it up.
I will. Let's see. I'm still like trolling for really good like liquor shops around here. There's one,
Oh yeah,
the closest one. I mean, there's a couple that are like around the corner and stuff that are mostly like corner market kind of where you can get like Jack Daniels and Smirnoff and stuff.
yeah,
But the closest place, there's a couple of when I was first here in like August, and I drove down. So I'm still used to being in the South, So I looked up just for the nearest Total Wine. So I drove down to Leesburg.
yeah. I remember.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. And so, but as it turns out, they're not permitted to sell liquor there. So it's like, okay. Now so I had to go to this ABC place. So it's like, all right, so I'll have to plan another. But even that place was kind of small. I'm like, where's like the Total Wine of whiskey up here? That's what I'm looking for.
yeah. That's I. I mean, I don't know. I know the South drinks, but I thought the North drank too.
All those Puritans up here.
Yeah, that's for sure it.
That's got to be what it is. All right. Now, I had a thought this week. I was going to bounce it around for everybody's ideas, but it's just you, so I'll bounce this around for your ideas. No, so on when was Immaculate Conception? Wednesday.
Yeah, Wednesday.
All right, so I was actually thinking about this. It's occurred to me while I was shaving, on concerning the like the delayed hominization bit. So obviously, so like I think Eliot's right. I don't think the church is ever like the proposition human life begins at conception. I don't think has ever been put forward like taught by the church as a proposition.
Well,
Uh,
it seems like it's pretty ordinary. I don't know, but
yeah, like so. Okay, but that aside, right?
yeah, that aside.
One wonders then. So something like the Immaculate Conception, if there was such a thing as delayed hominization, would it be true to say that Mary was immaculately conceived? If that wasn't Mary, right? If this was just like pre-Mary material.
I think what we'd probably have to say is something like what we mean by conception is the quickening, and not sperm fertilizing egg.
Yeah, I don't know that that's how Thomas used. I think Thomas makes a distinction between the
Well, I'm sure he does,
conception
but that's
and
we
the
would just have to
quickening,
say
right?
that's what we mean in the dogma is the quickening. Because like of course not. Like,
I mean, 'cause that's not ordinarily what we mean when we talk about conception.
well, how about this?
We kind of talk about the moment of fertilization.
Of course, yeah, I know. How about this though? So the original sin is passed on through male seed and generation. Now, if delayed hominization is true, then somehow whatever vehicle there is for the transmission of original sin has to be like present really in that thing before the rational soul is infused, right? Because there can't be
Say that again.
like this break in the bridge, right? So there's the male seed which transmits original sin, and then there's this period underneath with like without a rational soul, with a thing that's not capable of sin, and then all of a sudden infuse the rational soul, and boom, original sin. There's like this thing in the middle, which is not either of them, which is not the male seed, and which is not the human substance.
Mm-hmm.
So there would have to be something other than a human substance that can have original sin or something weird.
Yeah, and say that's
like virtually contained, or I don't know what it would be, but
yeah.
Yeah.
But see, it still seems like then if you were to say that the pre-Marian substance was cleansed from original sin, then that's not Mary being cleansed from original sin.
Yeah, so Thomas says what? That Mary was immediately, right? Immediately cleansed from original sin.
Thomas denies the Immaculate Conception.
Right. He thinks that Mary was conceived in original sin, but immediately cleansed from it. So I don't know if that means before Mary was Mary, or if whatever.
Well, you couldn't predicate it of Mary if it wasn't Mary.
Yeah, it's also. Yeah. I guess you just have to say it's not Mary, and so surely he would just mean at the moment of quickening, or right after, rather. I don't know though.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, at least back to your first question, it does seem like it's at least implicit in church teaching that the human soul is infused at conception.
Yeah, at least
which I think can gel with Thomas's reasons for delayed hominization if I think about stem cells is true.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at like Thomas's argument, it's not wrong in principle,
right?
So yeah, I wasn't really looking at it from just that perspective. I was really looking at it just from the standpoint of if you have to hold then that Mary is immaculately conceived, and then given what we mean by conception, that has to be Mary and not the pre-Marian vegetative sensitive substance or whatever.
Right.
See, I thought about that this week.
I remembered something I was thinking about. Well, maybe a couple things. First, general question. So, merit and punishment at the last judgment are given proportionately, right? So, if I do a lot of great deeds, I receive a better reward in the next life. If I do many evil sins, I am punished worse than someone who didn't, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So what were we talking about? We were talking about. We ended up talking about the Holy Innocents. Oh, so Thomas had an interesting point in something I had the kids read. It was in the Apostles' Creed, I think, Article 7 on the descent into hell. Thomas was talking about the people that Aquinas went to go save, right?
Jesus. But yeah. I mean, definitely, yeah. Thomas goes to save some people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That other guy, Jesus, the other cool guy.
Yeah, him.
So of course he goes down to save his friends, and Aquinas says, well, who are his friends? His friends are men of the old faith, the Jewish faith, who died with faith in the future Redeemer and without mortal sin. But he also says that he would have rescued infants who, because of the faith of their parents. And I was like, that's really interesting. I'm going to make a question about that in my homework. And that's what I did. So that's what got us talking about it. Because that has interesting implications, not just for the kids to understand about how baptism kind of works in the Catholic Church, right? But then what did they start asking me about? Oh, now I'm losing my original question.
Oh, it's got to be about the babies that die without baptism.
Yeah, it was. I was trying to remember specifically what it was. I almost had it. So it had something to do with the proportionate reward thing.
Oh.
Shoot, I just can't remember all the details. I remember I have one student who's a big fan of, was it, I think, Saint Therese's idea of the pitchers, right, or the
That's a good
containers,
image,
and God's going to fill all of us up as much as He can.
Yeah.
All right, so I remember she brought that up in as we were talking about proportionate reward, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so obviously, a kid who is saved through the faith of his parents, or maybe he's baptized and dies soon afterwards, has not done anything meritorious, right? So he's able to get in, and he's going to be perfectly happy when he gets in, right? He's not going to be jealous of like the scars of the martyrs or of Mary's special position in heaven or anything like that. But nonetheless, he's not rewarded as much as them, right? He's not able to, because he hasn't done anything to deserve more of a reward, right, than just having received sanctifying grace. Okay. And so she wanted me to reconcile that, or at least she saw tension between that and St. Therese's pictures, right? And so my thought was, well, so the problem is first that it would seem like everybody just sort of has a certain capacity predetermined by God or whomever or whatever, and when you get to heaven, whatever capacity you have, automatically that's just going to get filled up, right? And so Mary has the biggest capacity. She's going to have more, and you're going to have less than her, but you're both going to be full.
Okay.
All right. Now, somebody who lives a life of heroic virtue, obviously, if we're thinking in the pitcher's sense, they have a bigger pitcher, and they also filled it up. Right? Now, of course, I suppose we could say that God could very well make somebody a baby who he knows will die with a great big pitcher that he desires to fill up to the brim because he's just merciful. He's just going to give it to them without, the sort of normal way, I guess we would imagine that you would merit those sort of rewards.
Sure.
But I think in the ordinary sense, the baby, I think we'd have to say God just sort of, if he makes a baby and he knows that baby's not going to live long after baptism, he would have just made a baby with a small pitcher. If we're trying to keep on the pitcher train, that's what I was thinking. I don't know if that makes sense to you though. That God would he would make them with a small pitcher, knowing that they're going to die, and he's going to fill them up anyway.
Okay. Yeah.
And then maybe if he wanted to.
And why not?
All right. That's all I'm thinking is like, why not? If I'm trying to reconcile Aquinas and St. Therese on this, I think that works. It's a little weird, but I don't. Maybe St. Therese isn't entirely right on this, or maybe Aquinas is entirely right.
Yeah, I mean, there's also things that are obviously going to be in play that I don't know that we would know how to take account of them. So, like one of the first things we hold. I know, like, I'm pretty sure Thomas holds this too. I don't remember where off the top of my head, right? So what God rewards in us, right? It's obviously not anything that we do of our own, right? It's God rewarding the merits of Christ in us.
Exactly, yeah.
Right. And so
it is still like things that we did too. It's
sure, like
things that we couldn't have done apart from Christ. Yeah.
When we cooperate with that grace, and so sure.
Right.
But I don't know, kind of coupling with certainly God then could, in this moment, this infant who like is baptized and then who is now totally pure, who shares entirely in the merits of Christ's redemption. Maybe they could have a big picture in virtue of that. I don't know. Or to the other point, I don't see a problem in saying maybe they have a small picture.
Yeah. Okay, so either could work there.
Yeah, I don't see what would be wrong with either one of those.
All right, cool. I mean, I didn't see anything that seemed wrong to me. It was just something I had to kind of come up with on the spot.
Yeah.
And I thought it sounded a little weird, but all right.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah,
Another thing.
the
Oh, go
image
ahead.
thing. No, I was just thinking. I know the image of the picture kind of. I mean, it works. I think as an image when you're trying to talk about proportionate rewards. And Mary has like a big old keg, and I'm like a little shot glass, but that's fine. We'll all be filled up.
Well, the reason I actually kind of don't like the pictures is I don't think that God wills every good thing for every person. Right?
Okay, that's right.
So, yeah. So, the picture thing makes it sound like God is, and you've probably seen a youth minister somewhere do precisely this. God is just this fountain of grace. He's just shooting grace out. And then if your cup is turned up, you're going to collect all of that grace. And if it's upside down, you're not going to get any of it. Right?
Yeah.
If your cup is leaking, it's not going to contain as much grace, whatever, things like that. But that's actually not how it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, you're right. But it's just an image. So obviously it fails at a certain point. What we're trying to encapsulate is, God is giving grace, whatever that is, and in whatever forms it takes. And sure, he wills different graces for different people, or as you said, he doesn't will all goods to all people, right? I know about that. So, but the image then is just of like, let's say, like the water filling up the cup. Well, I mean, the water filling up the cup is just the image for God's grace insofar as you're proportioned to receive it. It doesn't say anything about what those graces would have to be, right? I guess if you wanted I don't know, if you really wanted to, I guess, stick to the image, then some people would have to get water and some people would get scotch. But like that, like some people get a greater, like God wills a greater good to some than he wills to others. I mean,
right.
Sure.
Yeah. All right, I got a couple more things that came out of my theology class recently that are coming to mind now. Oh no, now they're slipping away. There was one. Okay. We were talking about the redemption, and we were comparing penal substitution with, I'm not sure what to rightly call it, but the notion that Christ has offered a worthy sacrifice rather than sort of take into himself the punishment due to sinners. And I don't think like the infinite sacrifice thing excludes the punishment thing, but certainly there's a shift of emphasis. Mm-hmm. But specifically, we were criticizing, or I was trying to criticize penal substitution. And at first, I suggested that, so the problem seems to be that you're not actually made good; you were just imputed to be good, right?
Oh yeah, that's Luther's thing.
Right. Yeah. So you actually get into heaven with disordered appetites, right? With who knows what sort of evil in your heart.
Yep.
And so my initial thought, because I was thinking about it as a philosopher, perhaps, but I was thinking we have to be trained to delight in the good in the natural order, right? We're pursuing the natural end of human happiness. People don't. They don't value it rightly, right? So you have to get your virtues so that you can actually train your appetites to delight in what's really good and to take pain in what's really evil, so that the final end for man is something that is actually delightful to you.
Okay.
All right. So my thought with penal substitution at first was, well, if you're getting into heaven with a sort of a license, a certificate that says you're okay, but you're really not. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, this doesn't make any sense. This is what I was thinking. I was thinking that you would behold the vision of God and not find it delightful. That seems impossible.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, God's essence insofar as we know it, right? What we would see in the beatific vision.
Yeah, it would just immediately perfect you, right?
Well, God who is all goodness.
Mm-hmm.
But the notion of the beatific vision is being joined to that goodness. being united somehow, right?
Mhm.
In that goodness. But if there's anything disordered in you, that's intrinsically, it's I mean, ontologically incompatible. If there's anything that is disordered or
Yeah.
that's privative or any, you know, that's evil in you, then that can't be joined to divine goodness. It's actually repulsed by divine goodness.
Yeah. All right. So that's what I'm trying to wrap my head around. Because it seems like when you know and possess the perfect good, right? You cannot. Like any possibility for error falls away,
Mm-hmm.
right? Whatever desires you might have had for lesser things are immediately uh, replaced by the possession of the most perfect good,
Mm-hmm.
right? So even if you had disorder in your appetites, even if you had perhaps even malice in your will,
All right.
you
Are you
behold the beatific vision, and you seems like you should just
okay?
you
So yeah,
just.
like you're saying, if God just let everybody into heaven, we would all instantly be converted, seeing His awesomeness.
I'm wondering that,
Mm-hmm.
and if that's true, then I'm wondering what the point of purgatory is. Right? If purgatory is just about securing justice and making sure that only the people who deserve it get into heaven, or if it is in some way actually preparatory for the beatific vision.
Mm. I don't know if any of the fathers. Nobody I've ever read before, you know, pre-modern or like modern
Mm-hmm.
1960s, 1940s and onward type stuff. Nobody else ever seems to present purgatory as like a sort of, it's preparation for heaven, but like not in that sense. Everybody prior to the 1940s really speaks of it as it's like the burning away of all the rest of your disordered desires.
Which
So
wouldn't that
that
happen
you can,
precisely in the beatific vision?
yeah, I guess so. I guess what would need to be explored here then is the. So I think that's an interesting point that you raise about what it means. I guess what it means to know or to be able to perceive and know the good, right? Um. All right. So there's that, and then there would have to be something to this notion then of really, is there something in me? And I guess your question was just beyond the sheer question of justice, right? Like
Yeah,
something that,
I'm wondering if there's something beyond the question of justice. Because if it's just a question of justice, I guess it makes sense. But nobody seems to talk about it that way.
do they not?
Purgatory always seems to be presented as like analogous to the sorts of penance that we do now, right? Sorts of penance that we do now helps rectify our appetites and make satisfaction to God, right? So the
Yeah.
justice is there,
Yeah.
but it's not. That's not all that it is, unless that purgatory isn't really about the rectification of disordered desire, and it's really just about satisfaction, which it could be, but that would just be good to know, get clear on.
Yeah. I don't know. I'd have to think a little bit more on that. Because yeah, I think something about that sounds right. That I mean, yeah, purgatory is because it right. The first thing is purgatory is only for those who do die in a state of grace, right?
Right.
Like you have to have been in a state of, you have to be in a state of grace when you die, which means you have to be in a state where your will is ordered towards God, and is in a state of like sanctifying grace, right? Insofar as
Yeah.
insofar as you can be on earth in union with God, you have to be in union with God.
You could be a man of imperfect contrition though, and get into purgatory, right? Which would imply that I don't actually have like
The
I
love
don't
of
have
God,
perfect charity. Yeah, I don't love God. I'm just scared to
afraid of
death of
hell. Yeah,
hell.
yeah,
Yeah, and that's enough, right?
yeah. It
So you
is.
can get in the door and be judged among the elect with that sort of imperfection, and then presumably that imperfection is removed in purgatory,
Yeah.
right? Though it also seems like that imperfection would be removed immediately upon beholding the beatific vision.
But if so, maybe it is just a justice thing, right? If there's still something that you owe in justice, are you worthy to behold the beatific vision?
No, you're not, right? That much makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I could crop my former idea of purgatory down to just that.
I was going to say that, but then something about that even seems lacking. That if all it is all right, now you've paid your debt, now we can let you into heaven so that your will can be corrected. That something about that seems right. Something about that seems off.
Yeah, it does seem off.
Like, yeah, I think you have to say there is that element of both in purgatory.
Here, maybe this
is
something.
What is
maybe having your will in such a place that it needs correction, maybe that in itself requires satisfaction to be made to God.
Perhaps. Could it also be, okay, I like that. Something I just thought of. Okay, now it's leaving me. I understand this feeling you're having. Oh, hold on. Okay. You know how we talk about, okay, so we kind of do penance here on earth, as you just said, right, to kind of rectify our will a little bit.
Yeah.
And to deprive ourselves of these things.
Yeah.
So that we can start to turn our intellect and our will towards the understanding and desire of the one thing that is completely fulfilling of us.
Right.
Could it be possible then that purgatory is such that kind of stage of purification that you are burned, those desires are burned out of you in such a way that, like, kind of one by one, you start to see then that all of these things that you were attached to, right? You really start to see that they don't fulfill you, they can't fulfill you, the pain that they bring you, and you come to this understanding of, well, now there really is only one thing that will, and now you're in a state to enter the beatific vision.
Yeah, that makes sense. We would, I think, still need to say that having the disordered appetite is something that requires satisfaction. But if we say both of those things, I think that might be a good account.
Yeah, I think that.
I don't know. Sounds pretty good.
It sounds good to me. Like, I wouldn't mind teaching that in a class.
Okay. Well, cool. Neither do I.
I would submit it to the professional judgment of, well, maybe not to the current congregation for the doctrine of the faith, but somebody, I'd see what
I submit it to the high schoolers for review.
Yes. How is that going, man?
They're really good.
Because you're almost done, huh? First semester?
First semester, yeah. It's not
or second quarter. I don't know. However, y'all know.
Yeah, second quarter. So I get them for 2 more quarters after this. No, they're good. I hear good things in the class sometimes. Like, one of the boys will just lean forward and put his face in his hands and be like, "This class gives me so much to think about."
Like, yes.
Yes.
That's what I'm here for. Yeah, what was last Thursday logic class? We spent a good portion of the class just trying to come up with a decent definition for the term planet. I was like, I'm not really sure how you define that.
Wandering star, dude.
I have what I think. No. But yeah, it's funny how, I kind of judge that sometimes if I'm having a good class by how many students start having headaches by, like, towards the end of it. I'm like, yep, I'm doing all right today. It's all right.
What are you teaching logic and what else?
What am I doing? Old Testament. So we actually just finished talking recently about Maccabees and the prayers for the dead and the fact that there has to be purgatory, but we didn't get into what purgatory must be like.
I've been trying to do more Old Testament and typology as we've been working through the different things that we're talking about. I'm trying to point out different scriptural passages that are related. Ran into an interesting problem. Where's my Bible at? Well, anyway, I know the verses, and you do too. So the proto-evangelion in Genesis 3:15 that I think I might have talked about that last time.
Talked about that last time. Yeah. I took that recording down, by the way.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's probably good. So anyway, there is a fulfillment of that in John 19 when Jesus tells the beloved disciple to take Mary into his home, the woman. Interestingly, that's not the only place where John has used the word woman to talk to a woman, right? The very next chapter, Jesus appears to Mary Magdalene. And first, I think the angels, maybe, but maybe just Jesus, calls her woman.
Well, it happens a lot.
Yeah.
It happens first at the wedding at Cana. What is it, John chapter 3 or so?
Yeah.
And then
I think it's the woman at the well too, right?
Right, the Samaritan woman.
Yeah.
Or was that the one he calls the dog? I forget. One of them, but you're right. He does call. Yeah,
there's a couple cases at least.
Yeah, he uses it. Yeah, frequently.
So just trying to tease that out. Obviously, there's not two new Eves. At least it seems obvious to me. Nonetheless, it is also equally obvious that when Jesus is appearing to Mary Magdalene, John is trying to get us to think about Genesis 3:15 again, right? So, and Aquinas even makes a comment precisely on this point. He says that it is fitting that just as as sin entered the world, or the news of death, or the news of sin, or whatever, entered the world through woman, so also the news of the resurrection ought to enter the world through woman as well. So, I mean, there are different ways of thinking about new Eve, right? Or there is a different way, or a better way, or not a better way, but a lesser way, I suppose, of being a fulfillment of Eve too. And what's weird about it is this, and it's that there's many Old Testament types of Christ, which all find their fulfillment in the one Christ, right?
Yeah.
This is weird because it seems like there might be, maybe even more than Eve, there might be more women in the Old Testament that have that same sort of story that we would see Mary prefigured in, right? That you might also now need to see Mary Magdalene prefigured in, or I'm not really sure how to think about it. What I was trying to emphasize to the kids is that typology is not a one-to-one mirror image or anything, right? That there's not the old Eve and the new Eve,
but
that just...
Yeah, I get what you're saying about the one-to-one thing, but the typology is about its fulfillment in the new covenant. And this is why you can talk about all of these kind of prefigurements of Christ, all of these kind of prefigurements of Mary, all of these like prefigurements of the Eucharist or of the other sacraments, whatever, right? And all of them are pointing forward to the archetype.
Right, to the New Testament archetype.
But
this seems backwards. It seems like there are several New Testament archetypes pointing back to some one singular Old Testament type.
Yeah, and but this I don't know. I wonder if you might be overly reading into. So all right, so just because like Thomas talks about, it's fitting that then just so like sin, or the news of sin, the announcement of death, whatever, entered the world through a woman, that the news of the resurrection should be from a woman to the apostles. Okay, that's one thing. I don't think there's an immediate need then, precisely because we're talking about like that one-to-one connection, or the fact that even an individual in the Old Testament can represent multiple types, even in themselves. That I don't think there's an immediate need then to connect Mary Magdalene as a fulfillment of the woman from Genesis 3:15.
Not as the woman whose offspring is going to crush the head of the serpent. That much is true. But it certainly points back to Eve. So it may not point back to Genesis 3:15, but like Eve is the one from whom sin came to Adam, right? She brought the word of the devil to him. And so it's fitting that a new woman of the new covenant would bring news of the resurrection to the apostles.
Okay.
Right? So there's obviously that's also like a setup and a payoff so to
I don't know
speak.
if maybe that's a so to speak. I think, like you said, so it's.
I think the use of the word woman is just very telling. I really don't think you can take it any other way.
I don't know. It seems to also be a common part. It seems to be something of a common parlance of that time period. But I don't know. Right? So, like, oh shit, what was I going to say? There's a difference too, I think, between, like you said, there's something maybe about fittingness, and then that's one thing. I think there are a lot of things in that it would be fitting to do, and so it happens. It's different from it being like a fulfillment of some sort of prefigurement.
Well, all right.
I'm actually trying to see if I can think of another example.
Can make this comparison, which is another one Aquinas makes, right, between the tree of the knowledge of good and evil and the tree of the cross.
Yeah.
Right? He uses the same word, fitting, right? But I would also say that it's not just that God's making a parody of the narrative of salvation, right? It's that there's actually more to that, I think. So you look at the fruit of the old tree, right, which you ate of it and you died, and you look at the fruit of the new tree, which you eat of it and you have eternal life, right? So, like, when you make these sorts of connections, there's sometimes more theology to be done once the connection's established. So it's not just a fittingness in the same way that Dante assigns fitting punishments to certain sins, but there's more meaning there. There's signification there.
Yeah, so I was trying to think of maybe another example.
I threw this question at Bulzachelli. You want to hear what he said?
Yeah, sure.
Might take me a second to pull it up, though.
That's fine. Yeah, he's a smart guy.
Yeah, he's pretty smart. Yeah. See if I can find it.
That's fine. I told you that Osborne took a big steamer all over my dissertation proposal.
You always oversell these big steamers, though.
I can show it to you. Let's see.
I got the email pulled up. While you're pulling that up, I'll read it.
Go ahead.
All right, so Bulzachelli says, the typology of the woman, he's capitalized the W there, the typology of the woman appears in association with figures other than Mary, as in the case of Elizabeth, who is the woman of the Old Covenant, juxtaposed to Mary, the woman of the New Covenant. The Samaritan woman at the well is a woman type in the form of an unsuspecting would-be bride-elect. Mary at the resurrection is in a garden, not of life, but of death. And there she discovered, I think he's talking about Mary Magdalene now, right? Mary Magdalene at the resurrection is in a garden, not of life, but of death. And there she discovers the living one. Unlike Eve, who held out a grasping hand toward the world, he says in parentheses, she took some of its fruit and ate, and now, lest they thrust out their hands and take, I have acquired a man. Those are 3 quotes he provides there in parentheses. Mary is told by Christ, do not hold on to me. That's also in John 20. Mary Magdalene is told by Christ, do not hold on to me. She is the old Eve. This is his punchline. She is the old Eve set free by conformity to the figure of the new Eve, who at Cana and the cross assumed only a posture of humble submission to God's grace and trusting obedience to his will. What do you think about that? The old Eve set free by conformity to the figure of the new Eve.
Yeah. I was kind of thinking about that, something else you were saying maybe near the beginning. But it's like, could it be that all of these women are themselves prefigurements? So like each one of these women, there's something about all of them. They point towards each other, but all of them point towards the church.
That's true.
Ultimately,
I
right?
think.
So in that sense, I mean, like all of them are still a further prefigurement.
Yeah, so there's an allegorical and an anagogical reading, right? Sure, I think. Yeah. I think that's fine.
I don't know if that resolves any of the tension or your question. Or
no, I think that would be sort of on the side. I think to be sure, you can learn a lot about the eternal destiny of the church and uh, by looking at the eternal destiny of Mary, right? So there's you study Mary and you can see like what's to come, right? The anagogical sense of interpretation. But I'm just looking at these New Testament texts, these Old Testament texts, and trying to see what they have to say about each other, apart from what they might have to say about something else that's still to come. Well, I guess I'm trying to understand if Kelly here is.
Yeah, I wonder if you could separate it that hard, but
I still think. Yeah, I mean, I don't know why I wouldn't understand them differently. Obviously, your work would be incomplete if you didn't go on to consider the full sense. If you didn't go on to consider also the anagogical meaning in all of these things and texts. But still, I think the allegorical meaning should stand on its own and be intelligible on its own.
Yeah, I think that's right. But if you're then asking then about the, all right, then like I guess that's if. All right, I wonder about this. So just because, all right, so something might call to mind something out of the Old Testament, and yet there doesn't seem to be a very clear, like an exact sort of typological or allegorical prefigurement, fulfillment, something like that. And I think Dr. Rebard once just called it like a, how did he call it? It was an interesting sort of phrase, but just like a reminiscence or a shadow of something. And this was when I was thinking about this, so the question about whether or not like Christ ordains the apostles as priests at the Last Supper. And one of the things that stuck out to me one year was the notion of, before the priests when they would enter into the courtyard of either the tabernacle or later the temple, one of the things in the outer courtyard, you had the big bronze altar where they would sacrifice the burnt offerings, and stuff like that. But before they would do that, they had the big bronze wash bowl where they would wash their hands and their feet. And so during the Last Supper, when Christ is washing the feet of the apostles, I kind of wondered about then again, that's clearly a connection of priestly action, right? Especially in the context of the Last Supper, the pouring out of the blood.
That's good.
But the thing was, though, in the Old Covenant, of course, the priest would do the washing prior to the sacrifice, and of course, at the Last Supper, John clearly says this was after supper. Christ goes and washes their feet, but again, so it's like
what you could say is that they haven't offered the sacrifice yet, right? Christ offered the sacrifice, and now he's preparing them to go out and do it themselves.
That could be something, right? It just seemed like that was just more of a kind of, it's a connection, but I don't know if I see anything like that. That's just a clear, typological fulfillment or something like that. I don't know.
Well, I mean, that sort of thing might be what Kelly's trying to say when he says the old Eve, like Mary Magdalene is the old Eve set free by conformity to the figure of the new Eve.
I don't know what that means, because the figure of the new Eve is Mary, and how is Mary Magdalene being set free by being conformed to Mary in the garden the morning of the resurrection?
Not by becoming Mary, right? But by being conformed. So
yeah, I don't know.
Yes, that would mean, I would assume, being a good Christian, really. Like, that's I don't think it's that complicated.
Well, then,
yeah,
well, in that case, then still her being called woman then isn't for her. It's for her being conformed. It's still the primary reference is to Mary, then it would seem.
Yeah, I think that's what I want to maintain that.
Okay.
But nonetheless, she's being like called into that figure, right?
But that to me, that still speaks of the notion of the church, because that applies to all of us.
Yes.
But we're not the woman.
Yeah.
Not in any sort of direct sense or allegorical sense.
In some sense, though, in the sense that we all start in sin and we have to come around to that precise point where Mary Magdalene believed in the resurrection and conformed herself to the figure of the church.
But see, that brings you back to the church, and you were saying earlier you wanted the allegorical stance to stand on its own of this fulfillment. Just
I think it could allegorical sense can signify the church, to be sure. I thought we were talking before about like the eternal destiny of the church or something.
No. I was just talking about the figure of the church, not the eternal destiny of the church.
Okay, because Mary is a figure of the church.
Yes.
Right.
That's how I say it's Mary who is the fulfillment of the woman of the Old Testament. But even
let's look at this, right?
So the type of the church.
So the Eve is married to old Adam, right? New Eve is wedded to new Adam, right? Holy Spirit. There's a different sense. Sure. But fine, right?
Mother of the new Adam.
Yeah. But she's the spouse of the Holy Spirit, we always say, right? Mm-hmm. And likewise, the church is the bride of Christ, right? So there's like these three things, these three marital relations, and the former, so like the old Eve, old Adam points to new Eve, new Adam points to Christ in the church.
Mm-hmm.
Though the only like part that doesn't quite fit in really well is new Adam, actually, because we don't think of Mary as the spouse of Jesus, as the spouse of the Word, mm-hmm. right? And we don't think of the Holy Spirit as the new Adam. So that doesn't fit.
I mean, still, insofar as these things are like types, right? Mary is not the church. She's a type of the church. The church is wedded to Christ. And that's in the more direct sense. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but you're right. There's,
Yeah, that's weird. I certainly understand it better, but than before. But before, I thought I understood it better, and I was more comfortable in that position.
Yep.
Yeah, that's what I don't know. But I've been trying to bring out as much of this as I can. I always thought that if I was to teach an Old Testament class, that I would use the Lord of the Rings. Because there's
20 years ago today, man.
Yeah, I know. There's just so much in there that you can read in the same sort of typological sense that you can read the Old Testament. Mm-hmm. And kids are just better with the Lord of the Rings than they are with the Old Testament. It's just easier to read or more fun to read or whatever. I always thought that'd be fun.
I mean, that's still pretty good. You're doing all this with high school students. This is some pretty in-depth stuff.
They have pretty in-depth questions. I have to prep a lot for these kids, man.
That's awesome, though.
Yeah, it is awesome. Yeah.
Do you have to do as much prep for your college kids?
No.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome then.
Yeah. I mean, I know the metaphysics a lot better than I know the theology, so that sort of makes sense.
Yeah, but metaphysics is just natural theology, so
yeah,
it's all the same thing. Yeah, for somebody that turned me down to direct my dissertation because he said he'd never read a book on this topic and didn't know a lot about it, he sure did have a lot to say. I wonder if I can. I could share my screen. It's just got other. It doesn't have anybody else's email address or anything on it.
Do it if you want. I can see.
Let me try and see how that works out. Let's see. We want to share a Chrome tab. I want to share my webmail. Oh, it might be too small. Let's see.
That's pretty small.
Yeah, that is pretty small.
Oh, that's not that much. 5 points.
5 points, but it's basically like his point was, I think somebody back in 1911 already said this.
Oh, that's not good.
Case, yeah, he's like, so the proposal then doesn't distinguish between the sciences and all the connected arts. The first two issues lead me to a third concern. Let's see, which is about the connection between the science and the related art and economics as it's practiced by contemporary economics. He's actually got a point there.
Let me read through these real quick.
Okay.
Be a bit more clear on the section. Dude, I just wish I had the energy that Dr. Osborne has to just read. It's just crazy to me, man.
Yeah, I don't know how he does it.
So you got to read that first, the 1911.
I already got it on Google Books. I couldn't even find a print copy of it anywhere. As I'm like, where is this dude finding this stuff? But I said, all of this was really helpful. It was just like, man, he really kind of shredded me up a little bit.
Well, I mean, we'll see how Rod ends up. If he's told to beef up his bibliography, that might just be the first step, and then he beefs up the bibliography, changes some things, and Dr. Osborne's like, all right, now I'm going to I think
he would have given him all of it like he did. I think he would have given Rod everything like he did to me.
If he has things to give him, he might do it.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. Like, I think Rod's probably in good shape. Now, all of this, it was helpful, and I don't think it's anything I can't handle. I'll talk about it once you finished reading the points.
Have you heard of any of these names he's mentioning?
Yeah, I know them all. So the Herman Pesch, I already know he's not in my bibliography, and yeah, he's right. I should throw him in there. Langholm, I know. Schumpeter, definitely, but I'm using most of these guys though. Like they're all, I mean, because everyone uses them, so I'm already using their ideas. Granted, I'm quoting them through other people, the other sources I'm already using. Because those are all huge names. So yeah, I know them. I've certainly come across them. I don't.
So why didn't you put them in there to begin with?
Because I haven't used them as primary sources. Everything I've used from them has come through like the other stuff I've been reading and everybody else who's using them.
So he told me you got to read everything anybody ever wrote on this, basically.
I know.
That's what I got told.
That's the thing is like everyone on Earth has tried to say something about this topic. There's just way too much to read. But that was the thing. Like I get it's worth reading everybody if they all have something different to say. I'm not finding anything new anymore, and I'm still reading new stuff. And it's all familiar now.
Can you scroll down?
Let's see.
Yeah. Yeah, the last one is he's basically said in the first 4 points, you need to include all of this stuff, and then finally he's like, I don't know how you're going to be able to include all this stuff.
Yeah, I think that's funny that like Dr. Oliva didn't seem to think that would be a problem. But to his point, like there is the dissertation, like the proposal's already sort of divided into like 2 parts, and I could just drop off the second part. It's the second part is mostly an application of everything I established in the first part, and so
yeah,
like, all right, so if I need, okay, fine, I can dump all of that, and yeah, that would take care of a lot of the stuff he is talking about. Like, you need to include all these people, except you don't need to talk about any of this stuff. So the first point I thought was the heavy hitting one. If I get rid of the second part, then I think for Osborne it's just clarifying what the thesis is. And my thesis isn't that economics is a practical science, like he points out. That's been well established. What I'm not seeing is why that's true, like demonstratively so. But secondly, my concern, and maybe I need to rephrase then the way that I'm using this, because
excuse me.
It's then that the big people that are talking about this right now, all of the scholars in philosophy of economics or in economics properly, like, nobody's treating it that way. So
treating it as a practical science?
Yeah, with everything that comes with it, right? So my thesis isn't that it's a practical science. I'm kind of taking that as like it is, and looking at it that way addresses all of the issues that the libertarians and the distributists are raising in their writings. And those are the guys that are talking about this right now. There's nobody that's really looking at it from this perspective.
And so you want to show again why it's a practical science?
I guess, yeah. So what that means, I guess, yeah, this is Osborne's point then. I need to clarify what it is I'm really looking at. What it means to call economics a practical science. And then what I really want to try and do then is to show what it would look like if you built the science from its proper first principles. And no one has done that.
So I'm thinking about ethics right now, because ethics is a practical science. And I'm thinking about what it means to build it out of its first principles. And I suppose that would mean, because the tricky thing with practical sciences is that they deal with particulars too.
Yeah.
Right? And so the conclusions of a practical science will be an action. And an action will always be concerning something.
Sure. Right? And I think that's what he's talking about when it's like distinguishing between the practical science and all of the related arts, right? So look at Aristotle's Ethics. It's kind of a parallel of something, right? You can fill out the body of knowledge of ethics starting from its principles, and that's exactly what Aristotle does, right? He identifies.
Actually, I was thinking about the Ethics too, and I was thinking he's not doing what you want to do. In the beginning of the Ethics, he says we should ask ourselves, following Plato, whether we are on our way to or from first principles.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he says that his book, or at least it seems to me that his book proceeds this way, that he's on his way to first principles. He's trying to work out what are the definitions of these virtues we're going to be dealing with. What is the definition of virtue?
Yeah, but I think he only gets to that point proceeding through the notion of, like, he starts off defining what the good is, which is the final cause of all action.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, that's especially in practical actions, the final cause is it's first in intention. I mean, this is the first principle of practical action, is the notion of the good, right? It's the first principle of practical reason, right?
Yeah.
And then I think and then he spends the rest of the Ethics filling out then what? And so then he goes, okay, so here's kind of this notion of the good. Then next section, he looks at then this kind of human good, and clearly it can't be this kind of thing that we share in common with all living stuff, and it can't be this other kind of thing that we share in common with. It's got to be this specifically human thing. And then what is that? So, all right, and then that's acting in accordance with rationality. And then from that, we get the notion of virtue, and then we look at what the virtues are, right? I think that's exactly what he's doing.
Let me see if I can find the text I'm thinking of, see if he indicates what he thinks he's doing. What related to this, I'm not a close student of the physics except for like the first few books.
Mm-hmm.
But when I did read all of it, it struck me as not working like in the mode of demonstration.
Oh no!
And rather,
right.
but like
Sure.
inductively, except for maybe the unmoved mover at the end. That much, I think, is clearly drawing a conclusion. But I've been thinking lately, or wondering if the physics is not a more inductive exercise toward first principles, and then you have like on the generation of animals, De Celo,
I think,
etc. And those are the ones that probably proceed in the.
I don't think that's wrong, though. I haven't looked at those other works and any actually.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, and
you were wondering if the ethics isn't kind of the same thing.
Yeah, exactly.
If it isn't, it certainly does, but it does proceed exactly how I just described it.
It does, but I'm wondering if the connection isn't quite like deductive as you're suggesting it is. Like I think that he sort of works his way up to happiness.
I don't say it's not. I think you're right. It's not deductive in the manner of the presentation of a whole science. Because he's working his way through to what the virtues are as part of rational action, practical rational action, and so he's trying to figure out how all these then fit. But he certainly starts though, like looking at those principles again. He's looking at the first in intention, the notion of final cause, that everything acts for a good. That it means for humans to act for a good in this sort of capacity. And this is what we call virtuous action. So let's look at virtuous action. I'm not sure that's entirely, it's not deductive, like in the mode of demonstration, but he's certainly laying out the body of knowledge of a science, right? It's not necessarily like the art of right action. That has to be done.
Certainly,
that has to
right?
Be done
That's
in the student and with the virtue of prudence, and that's something that actually has to be done, right? You're just talking about laying out the theory.
Maybe that would be precisely the thing with practical sciences, is that the deductive work is really you don't do it sort of in the abstract or in a textbook. You do it when you're
acting.
When you're acting,
you're doing.
Right.
I
cannot find the text I'm looking for.
It's book 1, chapter. Where's my arrows? Is it chapter 2-ish?
Yeah, I want to say it's early.
I don't have. Where is mine?
I found it.
All right.
It's chapter 4.
Okay.
If you're in basic works, it's page 937.
937. I need a refill. I haven't gone this far on a hangout night and not a second round in a bit. All right, chapter 4. Yeah.
He says, line 30, let us not fail to notice, however, that there is a difference between arguments from and those to the first principles.
Yep.
For Plato too was right and blah, 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 blah. Presumably, then, we must begin with things known to us. Hence, anyone is to listen intelligently to lectures about what is noble, and just, generally about the subjects of political science, must have been brought up in good habits. We had to start with what's most known to us.
Yeah, let's see. 1095.
Let me compare that.
30. Okay, let's see. 51 of Thomas's commentary. All right, let's see if I can't do this. All right, you can see what I'm looking at?
Not really.
Okay. Yeah, this is, let's see, can I?
The commentary, right?
Yeah, this is Thomas's commentary on that section. I don't know if I don't know if there's a way I can like zoom in on it or whatever.
I can barely see it, but
that's all right.
You can read it to me.
He shows in what order we must discuss opinions of this sort, and in general, all moral matters. He points out a difference in the manner of reasoning. Some proceed from principles, that is, from causes to effect. On the contrary, others proceed from effects to causes or principles. Right? These do not produce demonstrations of propter quid, but only demonstration quia. This demonstration was previously made, or this distinction was made by Plato. Let's see. Then he offers examples from the race course. Right. Sometimes athletes were stationed at the beginning of the course. Sometimes they started from the judges and ran to the finish line. Sometimes they started from the end and ran to the judges. Likewise, there's a twofold order in the process of reasoning. Okay, yeah, we know. Then about things being better known to us and better known absolutely. Because we acquire knowledge by reasoning, we proceed from what's better known to us. Now, if the better known absolutely are the same as the better known to us, the reason proceeds from principles, as in mathematics. But if the better known to us are different from that absolutely, then we use the effect to cause procedure, as in natural and moral science. So that's interesting to hear your point about the physics.
Yeah, I was just actually turning to physics where there's that parallel text in Physics 1. Mm-hmm. He makes the same distinction between knowable in itself and knowable relatively to us. Yeah. It says that we need to begin with what's more knowable to us.
To us, yeah.
Right? So I whatever the truth is, it seems to include that Nicomachean ethics and physics proceed in a similar way.
Mm-hmm. Well, it seems, so we start from what's more clear to us.
Right. Yeah, we've got to get the first principles first before we can start going to work with them. So is your dissertation on economics a process of discovering those first principles? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. It's looking at what would be the first principles of economics when it's seen to be attached to political science, right? Or when it's seen in its rightful framework. Right. When it's seen as being dependent upon the truths of the speculative sciences, when it's seen as being a subordinate political science, and you're like, how would you do this? And then you start to then you start to lay out actual principles of the science. See, this is what I mean by a criticism being helpful. This is something I needed to think about and lay down. Because like Osborne's point, somebody like my thesis isn't that economics is a practical science. My thesis is following this mode of reasoning, to lay out the principles of economics proper, and that's not been done, I don't think.
Okay. One thing you said was interesting about its subordination to politics. I was thinking about the ethics again, because it's really the only practical science that I know besides politics.
Well, according to most authors, those are the only two practical sciences.
Right. Usually you would fit economics somewhere in politics.
Yeah.
But that's like under the heading. If you're going to make that division, then it would fall underneath it.
It's a political science. Yeah.
The point I wanted to make, though, was that Aristotle is very careful to do precisely that in the ethics, right? He wants to he's clear from the very beginning. This whole thing is for the sake of the political good, right?
Yeah, he even said the ethics, he's doing political science.
Right. So yeah, so your economics has to be similarly done, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's the steps that he takes that, or he starts to take. It's the politics. It's like book 1. It starts in chapter 3. He really gets going in chapter 8 and following, right? When he actually just talks specifically about the distinction between oikonomike and krematistike, and the different forms of krematistike, wealth getting. There's good wealth getting, there's bad wealth getting, so on and so forth, right? But then he kind of, because he's doing the politics, he leaves the rest of this aside. I kind of want to take that, and then I just want to fill it in. I want to talk then about how you start. You just pick up where Aristotle leaves off. And I mean, the first thing that you can distill out is actually something like the principle of marginal utility. And that helps you discern, when you're talking about, then you get into exchange between persons. And then you start that gives you the framework for talking about price theory, the origins of money, monetary theory, whatever. But that's what from that point where Aristotle just kind of leaves off to finish the politics, I want to distill the rest of the principles of economics from there. That's what I want to do. And that's what clearly Osborne missed, because I wasn't very clear about it. So I do need to kind of sit with that for a second and actually articulate that.
That just sounds really hard, man. I've often thought, reading the physics or the ethics or the metaphysics, how one would even begin to write this book had you not already wrote this book. Right?
Yeah.
Like, it just, like, how on earth do you be so smart that you can just figure out?
Well, I don't have to be that smart, actually. Most of the thing that needs to be done, and this is like the step that I think this contributes, since your dissertation has to contribute to the advancement of something. Mm-hmm. You have a lot of, so on the one hand, I can show, right, it's in the bibliography, it's in my narrative for the proposal, the Thomists and the Aristotelians and like the Catholic school in general, whatever, right, they've done a great job of just repeating what Aristotle says in the Ethics about justice and about what he says about wealth getting in the politics. And they've done a great job of just repeating those things without ever moving it forward in any way. And then on the other hand, where you have like schools of modern economics, the Austrians and the Chicagoans and the German historicists and so on, they've actually then been working on price theory, just wage, the origins of money, comparisons of value, things like that. And they really have worked out a lot. The point is that those two things need to be joined together. I just want to show how they are.
Yeah. What do you find in like the Austrian school or the Chicago school that is not done the way you want to see it done exactly? Like, if they've established in whatever way they do, different principles that belong to the science of economics, and they're workable and they can draw conclusions from them, what is left exactly?
Yeah. Well, for the Chicagoans, I throw them in there and just, this part of the neoclassical school. I'm not sure that they've done a whole lot that's actually worthwhile.
All right, so the Austrians then, or
the whomever. Austrians at least. So at least just since I was talking about it, but the Chicago guys, those are the ones that have overly mathematized economics, and it's just, I'm sorry, it's just not that exact. It can't be, right? But the Austrians, so the things, all right, so that they get economics as a practical science, that it starts from human action, the idea that human beings act for an end, and so they act with intelligence and purpose, and then so for some intention and so on. And a lot of them, they start their analysis there. It's great. I love it. All of them, though, almost, like, I mean, down to the last, they're like, economics has nothing to say about morality or politics at all, that it's a value-free science. right? And if it's a practical, if it is a practical science, if it's a moral science, then it has to be connected to the notion of the good and human flourishing somehow. And they want to just like, nope, we just want to talk about, they don't want to talk about the human action per se, right? Modern economics, and this is kind of Osborne's point, modern economics isn't about human action. It's about the side effects of your actions, right? Like, like if we do this with taxation, then jobs are going to go down or whatever, right? It's looking at side effects of actions, and that's most of modern economics, right? I think that actually deprives the science of something, right? If you're not connecting it to any sort of notion of good or human flourishing, then you actually lose something of value, even in your analysis. It comes back to, I hate to reduce it to like a cliched term, but partially it's true, right? Like modern economic theory can tell you all sorts of things about like if you do this course of action, these kind of side effects, and if you do that course of action, those kinds of side effects. And then it's like we have no idea whether you should do any of these or not, right? But the notion of like the political economy, or the political scientist, the political economist, the one who's actually looking for like human flourishing, human fulfillment, that's actually dependent upon a notion of the human good. And that has to then that has to inform your kind of economic analysis.
Okay, let me think for a second.
Can I get a refill while you think? Maybe.
Yeah, get a refill.
I need a we'll be right back screen for when I.
Yeah, you do. All right, so I guess what you're trying to say is that modern economics is really just an art and not a science. And let me explain why I would say that, so you can correct my error if I'm misinterpreting you. Because an art is not measured. An art does not like make a man to be good or to be bad, right? So like, man, I'm losing my train of thought. I had it a second ago and then I zoned out. Now I'm losing. All right, so I was thinking that if somebody's only concerned with certain things, certain claims that they just sort of fork over to somebody else and say, do with this information what you will, that seems quite like what I don't know, like a consultant would be. If I was going to consult with an artisan to make my ship, he would say, well, I would recommend making it out of teak wood because then it will endure better. If you make it out of oak, these things will happen instead.
Yeah.
Right? That's what the economist seems to be doing.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas what the economist ought to be doing is, I suppose, though I'm having trouble distinguishing this from the politician, I suppose they would be trying to determine what the best course of action is for the economy so as to ensure human flourishing. So if that's true, then I'm unsure what the difference is between the economist and the legislator. If it's false, well, I'll come back to it if it's false.
Okay.
Yeah.
So actually, one of the really good books that I read last year, I read it while we were still in Houston, Andrew Youngert's book on oh goodness, I could probably pull up my bibliography if I wanted, but he has a book almost on that topic, on that economics as a kind of, as a techne almost, or at least modern economics as a form of techne, and so that it has certain of these elements of an art. Right. One of the things that, okay, so to that, I want to say that I think that that's absolutely right, but I kind of wonder, I think all the arts have some element of a practical science to them, right? Like, to maybe, I don't know, to use it like this, right? We clearly talk about the medical art, right? But there's also, you could theorize that and like put it into a textbook and be like, this is medical science, right? Like, these are the things that we know about this medicine and this illness and this blah, 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 whatever, right? Or that if you want to perform a surgery and this is the diagram, how you cut and how you stitch up or whatever, the art, and form a kind of body of the practical knowledge. Right. So on the one hand, I mean, that's right. I think there are elements of an art, of a techne, especially in contemporary practices of economics. I forget where I was going to go with that. I had a point. Oh, I think one of the things too, though, why it's necessary to keep the consideration of economics as a kind of science, as an actual body of knowledge. So like at ACPA this year, I put forward, I think, an argument that I was thinking about just to kind of test the room to see how it would go over. So it was something like this, right? So you know that Aristotle shows in the Politics that the city is natural, right? The polis is natural because it's necessary for man to live virtuously, right? And this is why he says this is a natural thing. And the principle at work there, and I think he goes through it in the Metaphysics, is like book 4, or maybe book 5. It might be book 5 where he goes through all the definitions and stuff, right?
Yeah, it's book 5.
Yeah, one of the senses of natural, right? So that if something is necessary for the fulfillment of a natural end, it is itself natural, right? And this is his argument for why the city is natural, right? Because it's necessary for man to live in his to live virtuously, which is his natural end, right?
Yep.
Okay, so that was premise 1, right? That if something is necessary to fulfill a natural end, it is itself natural. Premise 2, in general, was that something like a free market is necessary for the fulfillment of man's, at least his natural material end, right? And I took a little bit of time to kind of maybe offer some of the reasons for that, kind of something like, well, not everybody is going to have what you need. You're not going to have something that everybody needs, right? In order to, you enter into exchange for the acquisition of stuff that you can't produce on your own.
Yeah, I think Aristotle basically gives that argument in the Politics. Yeah.
Right. So this requires then a certain amount of freedom of exchange, right? A certain kind of open market exchange. But it follows from that then that free markets or something
Well, it
like
requires
are,
exchange.
are natural.
Does it require free exchange?
It has to require. I mean, exchange by. No, I'm begging the question.
Well, what this would be is that like
Right,
I work for the state and I
Mhm.
produce for the state, and then the state is the medium of exchange, and then they redistribute everything according to everybody's needs, right? So in the abstract, does it require the free marketplace, or can the commune do the same job in the abstract?
I think in the abstract still, because the family, the village, all of this has a priority of sequence over the political state. You have exchange before you have political body. Like you have market exchange before you have politics. Even if there's not priority in time, there's a priority of being.
All right, I was with you until you wanted to say there's a priority of being.
Well, priority of that's what he means by priority of sequence, where their sequence of being can't be reversed.
Yeah.
Right. So this is why if you want
it's
to
not
talk
it's
about,
not like that they're like that seems like a chronological priority and not a sequence of being priority. Because the sequence of being is something like you cannot have two unless you have one.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah, sure. You can't have a city unless you have.
Whereas I could very well take away your free market, replace it with a state-run market.
Yeah, that's not what I was saying.
I could take away the family market. I could take away the family mode of exchange and replace it. Like there's not a dependent. It's not like two depending on one though.
That's not what I was saying. The family and the village has that kind of priority over the state.
All right, the family or the village
has that kind of priority.
Yes, yeah. The family or the village does. Okay, yeah. All right.
Right. So you could have then, and you would have that sort of exchange even prior to the state.
Yeah, but the sense of priority here is now chronological and not in the second sense.
I wonder if you would have exchange then, if what you're saying is right, if you would have exchange in the same way.
All we need, if our argument is just that our nature requires us to have different goods, and to get those different goods, my goods have to go to you, and your goods have to go to me, right?
Not necessarily, right? That's the whole point. I might not have anything that you need. You might not have anything that I need. This is that kind of reason for the entering into free exchange.
Right? Yeah, but your argument for the naturalness of the marketplace,
you can't just redistribute those kinds of goods. I said that.
Don't miss.
Yeah, so my argument for the naturalness of the marketplace is premised on the fact that a freedom of exchange is necessary for the acquisition of material goods.
Yes, and here I'm contesting the word freedom, right? All right. And because I don't think that exchange has to be free in order for me to have the material goods that I need to flourish.
Yeah.
That's not clear to me.
Why wouldn't it need to be free?
Because it could just as well happen that I work in my farm and this would be very inefficient, right? There's lots of inefficiencies, but I take my food from my farm, I take them into the state, I drop them off, right? And other people do the same thing with the works in the mines and the seaports or whatever. And then I get my my return, whatever the government wants to give me, and that could be credits that I spend in their state-run stores, or that could be a big box of my predetermined livelihood goods for the week or whatever. I don't know, but like that seems possible to me, even if inefficient and sort of very, very conventional, very sort of man-made, not happening organically.
Yeah, sure.
But I think that undermines the argument.
Well, it's interesting about the idea of the organic because, yeah, it does seem like the first form of exchange is going to be like, hey, Joe, I've got this apple and you have a pair of shoes, right? And
Yes.
so
Right.
The exchange does seem natural in that respect. It's just interesting you phrase it that way. But to the more, I think, crucial point, the point you wanted to get at about you could just bring your shoes into the state and then they just give you the box of goods or whatever.
Yeah. They decide what's in my box.
Yeah, and on
maybe that's the problem.
That is the problem. On what grounds do they have any knowledge to know what goes in your box? They could be giving you a whole bunch of other stuff that you've already got.
Yeah, the only way they could know is if I literally brought them a grocery list of what I needed, which is the very same thing as going to the free marketplace, right? Yeah, I like that. That works, I think.
Yeah, I'm glad this is on recording.
That they could not minister to the needs of all the people, at least without the people themselves like sort of telling them exactly what to do, which is
the knowledge necessary.
The opposite of what the whole project was. The project was for the top down to give the solutions, not the bottom up to give the solutions that the top then regurgitates back down.
The knowledge necessary for the fulfillment of your individual needs is not something that the state has.
Right.
Like, it's not something they can have.
Right. It would have to be given to them.
Right. And so anyway, so then if this argument stands and the conclusion being that a free market in some respect is natural, then I mean, that's a solid conclusion belonging to economics as a body of knowledge and not necessarily as an art. Right. So I think this is why. So the elements of both are.
Well, what else is loaded into the word free here? What are we explicitly excluding?
Sure, right. This is why, again, I think you have to tie all of this to a proper notion of the good, right? So, like, you can't have, or I was listening to one guy who actually I thought was better than this, but towards the end of one of his presentations actually seemed to say something when I was at Acton one year, seemed to just almost backed himself into a corner, like, well, if there's a market for it, it must be good. He just like, no, absolutely not, right? You can't, no. Right? I mean, how many markets are there for things,
Jeffrey Epstein.
Like, who didn't kill himself, by the way.
Right.
But I mean, how many markets for things are there that you're like, this is entirely contrary to the notion of human good? But my point about, so when bringing that up then is when you talk about regulation of the markets, which sure, there has to be. But the notion of like the naturalness of I guess what I'm including in the notion of freedom here is that I have the knowledge of what I need for my own flourishing and my family's flourishing, right, for our fulfillment. I know that I need X, Y, and Z to take care of our material needs, right? And when it's kept in mind with a proper notion of the good, that knowledge belongs properly to me, right? So sure, then the state knows that, right, you can regulate them. That pornography, this is like totally contrary to the human good, and so there's just, we're not going to make a market for that, right? And human trafficking, that's entirely contrary to the human good. We're going to make sure that there's not a market for that, and so on for some of these other things, right? Like I think we've talked even before about like the drug market. I think that's something that
that's what I was just thinking of.
Curtailed, right?
Yeah.
Precisely on this notion of human, right? This is just contrary to human flourishing. This is not something that we should permit, right? But so this idea then of a kind of the natural freedom of the market is what gives the structure, I think, to this discussion of, all right, well, how do we regulate this? And so I think it's within that confine of the law, right? You have a marketplace. And I think within that marketplace, there is room for a great deal of things, right? What you exclude from that is only, I think, even like Thomas says about, it's what you make unlawful. It's what is gravely contrary to human good and what from which most people can abstain. And within the confines then of a law that is generally directed towards human good, with people that have, in terms of the principle of subsidiarity, right, a better knowledge of their own needs, you let them pursue their own good, and things tend to work out better when that happens. the discussions about like school choice are a primary example of something like that, right? When parents are given the ability to actually look out for their own families and determine where they want their kids to go to school, actually everybody tends to do better.
So, what about OSHA?
The workplace safety people?
Yeah, what about them? I guess that's not directly in the marketplace, but it affects the marketplace.
Yeah.
Right?
So
it's in the workplace, but it affects the marketplace.
Yeah, any of those things that I like technically that the economists would call an externality, right? It produces a cost that's not included in the price. Yeah.
Yeah. Or another one that's close to my heart. That's flavored tobacco products, right? Which the FDA is regulating out of the marketplace too. So
discriminatory.
See these things, they're not like tobacco products. Everyone knows they're not good for you, right? But it's not one of those things that it's not like committing suicide or something. It's not in itself evil, right? It's just like it's not great. It's like eating Big Macs all the time or whatever. It'd be irresponsible if you just did it your whole life or something.
Although I'm actually surprised I need to make this argument to you, of all people, about tobacco. I think you would want to say that it's not like eating Big Macs all the time, because eating Big Macs all the time is just bad for you, full stop. You would want to say, of all people, I would think that cigar, while maybe being materially bad, formally is excellent.
Yeah. Well,
because it produces contemplation.
In me, it does, for sure. Like I'm securing a higher order good by that way.
Like materially,
exactly.
Materially, this is probably bad for me, but look at the discussion that we're having, right? My spiritual good is so outranked,
right?
Whatever detriment is happening here. But see, that doesn't doesn't happen with Big Macs, drugs, or porn.
Okay, but Big Macs, you might say, like, they're very convenient and easy, and that helps me secure the higher order good of getting to mass on time or getting to work on time or something like that, right? So I think there's lots of ways to weave in here, but maybe we just fall back on OSHA because OSHA is interesting. You might say that OSHA is interested in human flourishing. You can't do XYZ at your business. You have to have these sort of safety protocols in place. You've got to have this expensive fire extinguisher, this expensive chemical rinsing, whatever, and that shuts people out of the marketplace.
Yeah, it does.
Right. And props up big businesses, of course. So that's interesting because it's not clearly contrary to a free market. Because those sorts of regulations could, if done rightly, advance human flourishing, or they could detract from human flourishing, and trying to figure that out is really hard. And I think there's probably a lot of issues precisely like that when it comes to dealing with the free marketplace. What I'm trying to say is and you said this already, but by free marketplace, we don't mean like the underground, the black market, where anything goes, right?
I literally mean, according to the concept of free that Aristotle lays out in the
Ethics, right.
I am the principle of my own action, and I am unencumbered that I can act for what's really good.
Yeah. So
now, a legitimate criticism of that then as well, then how many people are in that state that they can be just let loose in the marketplace? But this is why I think you have the constraints of the law. That then there are all those other things on the peripheries, the stuff that we've said is clearly contrary to human flourishing, that you exclude, at least from the public marketplace. Yeah, stuff like OSHA, I don't know. That would be interesting for me to reflect if that belongs more to the art side of it, right? Because then you're looking at right here, right now, this regulation. Is that actually going to put people out of business, and that's going to have this overall negative effect, right? So then this business is going to have to close, and then all of these people are now out of work, and then that's going to be money that's not spent in this neighborhood, and that's going to cause other businesses to close, and then so on.
I think it still belongs to the science side. I think the science side can still deal with concrete conclusions, right?
I don't know.
Like the
Right? Didn't we say at
conclusions,
the
the
beginning that
conclusions of ethics are not art,
Mhm.
right? The
But they're
conclusions of ethics are not art.
also extremely general.
No, they come down to this action is good, right? There's always a this, which makes it concrete.
Sure, but that was my point though in saying you would have to look at this OSHA regulation is going to have this effect.
Yeah, yeah, but I still think that keeps it in the science. I don't think you need to worry about whether it's art.
Whether it belongs to the art at that point.
Yeah, yeah. I think we're still in science.
That's fair.
The
problem with this, these are way too good.
What are you drinking?
I'm still using
maple cinnamon.
Yes. This is I introduced it to one of my colleagues here and he said the same. He said this was a game changer. You can't go back. You can't go back after this.
It's especially good this time of year.
But the thing is, it goes back a little too easy. So. All right, that's interesting then about that it doesn't. I mean, that's a fair point. I see what you're saying about it would still belong to the science.
Yeah, I think so anyway.
I get that. It's just, there's a lot of stuff you would have to start to consider. But I think you're right. I think you could consider.
See, these, I think this is maybe where what some of you said earlier is important, where the decisions of economy are subordinated to the decisions of politics, in that they're subordinated to the end of politics. So, like, the measure of a good OSHA regulation would be, does this assist our people to acquire the material goods necessary to live well?
Yeah.
Or does it frustrate that?
Yep.
Right. And so if it's literally just propping up big business, it's frustrating that.
I think that's right.
So that's actually kind of simple, I guess. I mean, answering that question is not as simple, but establishing the question, I think, is maybe simpler than I thought it would be.
Yeah, the criteria for settling the question is simple.
Yeah.
Yeah, see, this I think has all the makings of a great dissertation topic. I just got to get it. I got to clarify it for Dr. Osborne. I'm so happy he's reading for me because I know this thing is going to be awesome by the time it's done, like 25 years from now.
Yeah. I just hope I have something to share at some point in the future.
I haven't heard back from Carl in a bit.
Carl is busy as hell, man.
No, he is not, because ACPA is all finished now. I know
he's still chair, and he's still
semester's almost
and he's
over.
teaching.
He's got nothing. He's teaching undergrads. That's not the same thing.
Still really busy. I bet it's busier teaching undergrads than grads.
Let me ask you. This is just I'm just curious for your thoughts on this, right? Because I want Sam Gregg to be one of my external reader. Now, Sam is he's the director of research for the Acton Institute, which is like the big boy in the playground in the United States for thinking about ethics and economics. He's a doctor of philosophy from like the Oxford in England, has published over 30 books, both popular and scholarly. He's published a number, even more articles, again, popular readings, but scholarly articles in peer-reviewed journals. Gives lectures on this topic in like every country. Like, the man is a worldwide recognized authority on my topic. The center's kind of like pushing back a little bit because he's not a tenured professor at a college or university.
Yeah, your external reader is supposed to be a big dog and also an official big dog, right?
What does official mean? This man, like, he's recognized by every other institution who invites him for these lectures as being the recognized authority on this topic.
Maybe it's more of a longevity thing. Who knows what could happen to his career if he's not tenured.
Carl did say something about that it might have to do even with the center's accreditation, that in order for them to give the degree, it's actually written in there that it needs to be looked at by. And I said that's fine if that's the case, but I asked him, I want you to look into that for me. And I sent him and I copied Oliva. That was like 2 weeks ago. I haven't heard from either one of them since. Osborne, I've heard from that man twice in the same period of time. Once when he took a big steamer all over my proposal, and I've not heard from anybody else yet. It's like the other one I thought was really funny. I asked Dr. Carl a question in the PS to my email, and Osborne answered back. He's like, I know the answer to this. It's that.
Like, well, Osborne knows better than anybody how busy Dr. Carl is.
I'm sure. But it's like this is one of those things to get an external reader, that kind of needs to happen soon, and then Carl needs to give me his feedback so I can start revising this so I can send it back to him. And this has been really helpful. So this is awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
I wish you had something to talk about so I could be as awesome.
My only thoughts right now are the same old thoughts I've been having that I haven't worked out yet.
All right, fill me in. What's happening in Russia or Ukraine, or if you wanted to talk about whatever you were going to.
Oh, yeah. Well,
I got no idea what you're talking about.
What I'm wondering about it is... So what do you know about it?
Nothing. I'm not exaggerating.
All right, so you know the USSR collapsed in 1991.
I do know that, yes.
All right, so they had a lot of territories then.
Yeah, and the Ukraine
and now they don't, right? That's the starting point.
Yes,
now, the territories that they lost, as far as I understand, were actually sort of important for Russian sovereignty and security. So think about Croatia, which they recently retook. Croatia gives them sea access. You cannot be a modern industrialized nation if you're landlocked.
Sure.
Right?
Is Russia landlocked otherwise?
They've got access to the, is it the Baltic Sea? Or I can't remember. They do not have water ports that are open year-round, I think, outside of the Black Sea.
Okay.
I have to double check, but at least this much is true. They don't have enough. Think about the United States, right?
Okay.
The United States has 2 full-blown coastlines. Think about England. Think about France. Think about Spain. Think about Italy. Think about Germany. Germany's even a little bit on the edge of what they really need. That was actually a huge issue with Versailles, was their lack of access to ports. And that was part of the reason why they had to use U-boats in World War II, is they didn't have ports to build a navy prior to action. So anyway, the map was helpful.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, if you want to zoom in, like on Croatia, you'll see right in the Black Sea, just sort north of Turkey, right?
Okay, hold on, it's down here.
Because that's where Ukraine is.
Hold on, there we are.
So they recently retook Crimea, which is that little spit of land sticking out into the middle of the Black Sea. Looks kind of like
this here.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay.
So they took that or most of that, right? And now they want Ukraine. As far as I can tell, there's 2 or 3 reasons why they want Ukraine. The third one might mean that they want more. In fact, some of these might mean that they want more, right? Ukraine gives them more port access. Ukraine is an old...
The Black Sea. The Black Sea has to pass through Istanbul.
I'm going to get to that. Yep, I'm going to get to that.
That doesn't give them any kind of access, but whatever.
If you... historically, the Ottomans and the Russians were having precisely this problem about access to the Mediterranean Sea. Think about how uncomfortable we would be if our access out of the United States, right, our access to the sea passed through a narrow choke point in a really neutral sort of space like Saudi Arabia or whatever, Not even Saudi Arabia, because they're not even really neutral right now, but...
Well, think about, I don't know, like if everything in the United States, if it was landlocked on both coasts, everything had to pass through the Mississippi, it had to pass through New Orleans or something like that.
Yeah. So think about the Civil War, right? And how easy it was to blockade the South, right? Yeah. Precisely because of that. Yeah. And now it's even worse here because it goes right through a place they could easily fortify the hell out of Istanbul if they wanted to, and they could shut Russia down really quick.
Yeah.
That's got to be on Putin's mind and anybody working in national security in Russia.
But that's why that doesn't offer them anything, because that could be shut down, right?
That's why I don't expect it to stop.
Like that's why they've got all this over here.
Those aren't good ports for 2 reasons. I think they get cold. I think they might even freeze, and not that the ocean freezes, right? But that the ports would freeze if they couldn't get cargo in. I'd have to double check that, but I'm pretty sure that's true. And even if that's not true, look how far away that is from Moscow.
Let's see.
Do you need to like? It's a hemisphere away, practically.
I'm not actually sure where my. There it is. There it is.
Yeah.
There's Moscow. Yeah, it is. That's like way the hell over here.
Yeah, that's not a logistical feasibility. You know,
Don't they have like trains and whatnot? I
I'm
don't
sure
know.
they
I
have trains,
I don't
but
know anything about this. So
even think about it. Think about if they have somehow a train that runs so efficiently that they can actually get affordable cargo from the Pacific Ocean to Moscow. That would be vulnerable the whole way. You blow up any point on that railroad, cargo stops.
All right, but I mean, okay.
And they cannot defend.
Look at that, though.
What is it? 20,000 miles of railroad.
There's nothing but Russia between there.
What does that matter for? You need one jet with one bomb. Boom. No more food in Moscow. Right?
Attack.
Or,
you're making me
all right, so that's a problem. I'm not even like getting to my central point here. I guess I'm just still laying out things that I know.
I don't know what's happening over there right now.
Well, neither do I. I'm kind of trying to figure it out, and what I'm trying to figure out is what U.S. interest is over there, because the way it is pitched, which is not true, this is just plebeian talk. But the way it is pitched is that Ukraine is a democratic state, and Russia is sort of not.
Oh, yeah.
And so, like, we want more people on the team or something. Because the thing is, Ukraine is not a trading partner with NATO or with anybody. They've talked about it. But nothing has happened yet. It's not like Poland, right? So that's the difference. Like, if we have a really strong and important trade relationship with Ukraine, like we have with England or like we have with Canada, we would have to protect them to protect ourselves. That makes a lot of sense. Why would we ever consider sending troops to Ukraine? The only thing I can figure is if we have to draw a line somewhere, because we predict that if Russia takes Ukraine, they're then going to push into Belarus, Lithuania, etc., to get more port access. And perhaps, I don't know if they would still do this, but in World War II, I know this was a concern. They wanted to push up until they had strategic defensibility for Moscow, which it's almost entirely plains from Poland to Moscow, as Hitler demonstrated with his blitzkrieg there. Right, he took Moscow in like months. I don't think that matters as much anymore in modern warfare. I'm sure it matters some, but modern warfare is mostly range and air. So flat ground would help with occupation or whatever ground support, but you could cripple a whole country without ever landing a boot on the ground, I think. So I don't think that matters as much.
We've done it.
So maybe they wouldn't. Maybe they wouldn't actually threaten Belarus, Poland, or any of the other Baltic. What is that sea up there above Poland? Is that the Baltic Sea? I don't think that's the Baltic. I think that might be Greece.
Nope. Baltic.
What is that? It is Baltic. Okay. So it might threaten the other Baltics there, but I doubt it.
Greece.
I think he just wants Mediterranean access, in which case I would expect him to push south into Turkey as well. I don't know. I'm just guessing. What I really want to know is why on earth we care. And Tucker Carlson made a whole segment about this, and it was kind of funny because watching it, I was thinking, like, you know what? This sounds exactly like what a Russian hack would say.
Oh,
like
I do know a guy who is a Russophile. I was asking him a little bit about this. The only reason I bring it up, I could see if he's around. I could send him a link if you wanted to bring him on real quick.
No, I got to get going soon.
Okay. But I just asked him kind of briefly in passing, because I knew you'd brought this up, like if we had any real interest, and he didn't seem to think so at all. But that we don't really have, because we don't have an interest in Ukraine by itself. He kind of described it as he said, like, they might want to be a big boy in their neighborhood, but they're always going to be like the Belgium of Eastern Europe.
Yeah.
I guess that means they're not ever really going to amount to anything. I don't know what the long-term I don't know really what that means, but I guess that's like they don't really have a whole lot to offer of themselves. by themselves, in other words, that we would have any real reason to kind of like stick our necks out for them. But that's all I kind of got just in passing. But
yeah, I mean that's where my mind is at on this right now too. But there could be something I'm missing, like if
I guess it might.
Because I guess if I'm right in that they really just want Black Sea access to the Mediterranean, I don't know how long they're gonna need one of two things. They're gonna need a strong interdependent relationship with Turkey, such that Turkey in whatever conflict would have to side with Russia for their own sake, or they're gonna have to take Istanbul, because if there was some sort of threat, they'd be shut out, right? Yeah. And they'd be running on rations until the rations ran out.
Yeah. That kind of seems right. I guess, like you said, it would be different. It might be different, maybe, if we had reason to suspect that Russia had any sort of like maybe imperial or like really sort of conquering or expansive maybe ambitions.
It kind of looks like it. The way that he's been promoting nationalism for a while. Sure. I'm not anti-nationalist by any means, but nationalist in the sense of like
how much of that is
Russian pride and Russian pride in the sense of like USSR Russian pride. Yeah. Like I mean, we spanned from here to here.
People though.
Well, he might need to do that too, right? That could be a third reason why he might need to push further into these old countries that he occupied before, because he, as an individual, and not thinking as for the good of Russia, but as an individual, wants to stay in power.
Yeah.
And to stay in power, he's going to do some things that the people want, right? Just an inefficiency in his program, he might look at it as, but nonetheless something that he might do.
Has Russia ever done anything because that's what its people wanted? That would be...
it's a little different now. I don't think they have the same sort of face on that they had in the USSR, where everybody thought that everything was going swimmingly when they were really struggling the whole time. Since then, which wasn't that long ago, there's plenty of people in Russia today that lived in the USSR who saw the USSR collapse because of mismanagement and bad politics. They don't have that sort of faith in Russia anymore. So it might be more important now than it ever was to keep the people sort of together, right? Giving them something to live for and fight for and believe in. And it looks very similar to what happened in Hitler's Germany. So Hitler's Germany is reactionary against the Versailles destruction of the Austro-Prussian people, right?
Something like that, yeah.
So all those people who were separated are like, this sucks, and we're all poor now. And all the Russians, since the USSR collapsed, are like, this sucks, and we're all poor now. And they've got all their territories are still nearby. They're not strong, and there are loyal people in those territories that want to be part of Russia again. It's just like Middle Germany, right?
Yeah. That was something else the guy said, that Ukraine isn't a distinct enough dialect to actually be considered separate from Russian. As a language, he really was saying there's no such thing as Ukrainian. The dialect is not. It's not that distinct. So
I don't know if you know also, but like funded by Putin, there are Russian separatists that have been working in eastern Ukraine, and for some time they actually took over a good deal of territory before the actual military was sent in to defeat them. A sort of minor civil war of sorts.
I believe. I mean, like you're right. It's clear that Russia wants Ukraine back,
and that some of Ukraine wants Russia back, and that it seems an awful lot like Hitler's Germany and the same sort of mobilization.
Yeah, I'm not. I haven't looked into the question enough to know if it just seems like people that I know, and like you talking about, it just doesn't seem like the United States, qua United States, has enough of an interest.
Well, think about this. Okay, what was it? I guess it was definitely, we let the bar get pushed a lot further back then, but when Hitler was taking over Germany, the United States didn't want anything to do with it, right?
Yeah, we just gotten out of World War I, and we didn't
exactly right. And here we're in a similar boat. We're like, we have been at war forever. We're tired of this. It's expensive.
Yeah.
We have let Hitler have Ukraine, just like or let Putin have Ukraine, just like we said, let Hitler have Poland.
Yeah, sure.
Right. Even when I don't know exactly when the tipping point was among the American people, but like
Pearl Harbor, wasn't it?
For the American people.
Yeah, that's what got us into the whole, like, we jumped into the Eastern theater, and then we just were like, screw it, I guess, let's jump into the Western theater.
Well, we needed the Western people to help us in the Eastern theater,
like, we didn't jump into we didn't jump into Europe until after Pearl Harbor either, I don't think. That was
arguably we jumped in too late, though.
I'm not saying that, I'm just saying that would seem to be the triggering point.
Well, the connection I'm trying to make is here we're wondering like whether we should just let Hitler take Poland. What does it matter, right? Yeah, maybe Hitler even takes France. You know, whatever. We can trade with Hitler.
I'm not hearing a downside. No Poland, no France.
That's the thing. Like,
hearing a downside.
Are we in the exact same position as we were before, where we should be like actually? If only someone had stopped Hitler before he had gotten so far, his economy would have collapsed early, and his people could have been given better governance, right, for the sake of everyone, and not just their sake. Are we in that boat right now, or is it really just like?
That's an interesting.
Is it really just that, like, when the USSR collapsed, the borders just weren't drawn up well, and that Putin's just going to fix some of that, and then everything's going to be Gucci?
But that could be true. But the more kind of abstract but kind of interesting question there, it's starting to leave me, is on the notion then, it's kind of like when people talk about the morality of the preemptive strike. Like, sure,
yes.
if we had stopped Hitler earlier, yeah, it might have been better consequentially, but the question is, did we have reason to stop him earlier?
Yeah, I think so. I think there are more threats that can be made against a nation than setting boots on your ground.
A potential threat isn't a threat. It's only a potential threat.
Yeah, I'm not talking about potential threats even, but like
kind of like you, yeah, but not even like boots on the ground kind of thing. It's like,
okay.
I forget what I was going to say now, but the idea was, like, okay, World War II and Hitler's doing this stuff in Europe and we don't like it. And sure, it could end up really bad and we might wish that we'd stepped in earlier. But the fact of the matter is, when did we actually have reason to step in?
I think as soon as he starts affecting your trading partners.
Now, see, that's a legitimate point, right? Like that, because that affects somebody that you are partnered with, and by extension, then that affects you then.
Exactly.
In kind of indirect way. I don't know. Does Ukraine do anything for us?
Yeah, I don't think so.
Like,
but there's another question too about preemptive strikes. So take like the Cuban Missile Crisis, right? That was obviously much more severe than this, right? But I think the principles involved are the same. We do not have to wait, I do not think, for a nuclear launch to say, get those missiles out of Cuba or we will remove them.
Yeah.
Right. We cannot live in peace in our country and work for our own good as long as those missiles are there pointed at us.
Yeah, but that's exactly right. But that's a
potential threat. It's just potential.
You're right. But there does seem to be I wonder what distinction I would want to make, right? So are there levels of potential threat? Joe, right? You would say, right? There's a difference between, we're sitting here talking, there's a difference between I've got a gun in my pocket and now I have a gun in my hand.
Gun in your pocket's not a threat.
Yes, it is.
No.
It is if we're talking.
If we're talking about potential threats.
No. That's what I'm saying. Yeah, that's like there's a difference in that kind of potential threat. But I don't know what All right,
so here's the difference. The difference is that you and I belong to the same country, and our goods are actually intertwined,
Mhm.
right? So I know that my average person, while if he's open carrying on the middle of Main Street, I'm not worried that he's going to draw on me because we have the same common good, and I know we do.
I don't know that anymore.
That's why, right? That's why you're not afraid that he's going to draw on you.
I don't know that anymore, but all right, I understand the example, so keep going.
Yeah, like obviously they could betray you at great personal cost, but like it's strictly speaking a potential threat. But like the difference is that they would lose something tremendous if they were to act it out.
Sure.
Whereas, like, if we were to.
So would Cuba by launching nuclear missiles, or so would Russia by launching nuclear missiles.
Not if they could just get you first.
Well, the thing is, even with this is the whole point, right? It's not really that possible for them to get us first, right? We would know hours ahead of time that they'd launched, and we would launch back, and we would end up. This was the point of the whole.
Yeah, right.
Thing, right? Is that they would get screwed too.
Right. Well, yeah, I guess it does seem like that it's just a matter of remoteness then, and there's probably a better way to distinguish different modes of remoteness of potential threat.
Because like there's a difference. Like if I don't know, like again, for the sake of the example, like if you or I are arguing or whatever, and it starts to get a little bit heated, and I like shove you or something, and you shove me back, that's a certain level of threat that's manageable, right? But then there's like, all right, that's when the gun in my pocket now is a much more serious kind of potential threat than it was before. Yeah, this seems to be just a matter of degree. I don't know that I really.
Yeah, maybe. Well, in any case, I mean, I still think we were right to get involved in Cuba when it was a merely potential threat. And I guess also, I mean, there's just and unjust sanctions too. You could say like so. Sanctions in a way are of the same genus as an act of war, in that they're intended to inflict harm and restore justice. They just use different means.
Only I guess sanctions. It depends on. Yeah, I guess so.
So
sanctions they're not always used as punishment, but I guess an act of war could be considered punishment too, right? Like if you do this, I'm going to kick your ass.
That's exactly what war is all about.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah. War is just the way that international law is enforced. So, yeah, I guess it's all a matter of assessing potential threat then in Russia and their involvement in Ukraine. Yeah, I don't know. That's enough for me to think about for tonight. I don't have anything else on that.
Sounds good. I'm gonna work real hard to get Julian back next week, and we should get Pete and Jake in here. Pete, they both said they were interested. I know Jake is whipped, and I know Pete has responsibilities and whatnot. So, but next week, are you good for next Friday?
Yeah.
Okay. I'll be good too.
I think so. Let me just double check the date. I don't think I have anything coming up, but
it's the 8th.
Yeah, 17th. Yeah,
17th. Yeah. Because that's our last. That'll be our last. Everything will be done that day. Then that whole weekend I'll be grading. But hey.
Cool.
All right. Actually, there was something I think I wanted to. There was something I wanted to tell you. Hang on for a second when I end the.
Yeah. I got one other thing too.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay. Is it a private thing or?
Yeah.
All right, then. All right. Let me go ahead. I'll end the broadcast. This has been great. I might put this up on my YouTube channel. We'll see. I want to start building a thing, but that'll be
Yeah.
that's something else. All right, then hopefully we should be good for next week. All right.
Cool.